Welcome to the deep dive. Germany, often seen as Europe's economic engine, is at a really fascinating, maybe even precarious crossroads under Chancellor Friedrich Merz. We've gathered a whole stack of sources today, news reports, economic data, political commentary, to really dig into the policies and, frankly, the stark economic realities reshaping Germany right now. So what we're diving into for you today, well, it's this surprising contrast. You've got deep welfare cuts at home, but then significant financial aid going abroad. We'll also look at the German economy itself. It's facing some real challenges and the sort of wider implications of Merz's whole political strategy.
Exactly. Our mission here is to really pull out the core arguments, the specific numbers, the stories behind the headlines, so you can get a much clearer, more nuanced understanding of what's actually happening in, well, one of Europe's most important countries.
Okay, let's jump right in this so-called Merz formula. Our sources point to a pretty blunt message from Merz himself. He said it at a regional CDU party conference, I think in Niedersachsen.
Yeah.
Basically, Germany can't afford its current welfare system anymore.
Right. And this wasn't just like an off-the-cuff remark. It sounded like serious prep for more cuts to social spending. But here's the kicker, something our sources really highlight. These kinds of cuts, they've actually been happening for about 20 years already. So this is more like doubling down.
Doubling down, yeah. And then there's the timing, which is, well, it's something.
It really is, because almost right after saying no more money for welfare, Merz makes this huge commitment internationally. We're talking $9 billion a year to Kyiv for 2025 and 2026.
Wow. $9 billion a year.
Yeah. And that's piled on top of the $44 billion Germany's already given. I mean, that makes them the second biggest backer of Ukraine right after the U.S. It's a massive amount.
So, okay, here's where it gets really interesting, or maybe just really tense. For a lot of Germans, based on the analyses we read, they see this, and many apparently call it hypocrisy. You know, money flowing out to a foreign war, but belts tightening at home for their own safety net. So what does that do to public feeling, to trust in the government?
Well, it definitely throws up this big question about balance, doesn't it? Domestic needs versus these huge international commitments. And the sources we looked at suggest this feeling, this perceived imbalance, it's really stirring up tension. People are asking if the government's priorities match their own daily struggles.
It sounds like a real disconnect.
Yeah, a potential disconnect between sort of the political class and ordinary families. It could be seriously divisive.
Okay, so that's the welfare aid paradox, causing friction. But you mentioned earlier, this isn't the only area where people feel let down. Our sources also talk about Merz walking back other promises. Can you give us some examples?
Sure. Yeah, beyond the welfare thing, there are other examples that seem to have chipped away at public trust, like his promises on public debt. Apparently, they found ways around the rules, the debt brake, to free up money for military spending, kind of off the main budget.
Ah, creative accounting, perhaps.
You could say that. And then there were promises, specific ones, about energy tax relief, with prices being so high, and even benefits from others. But those were either reversed or, well, seriously scaled back. And each time that happens, it just adds to this feeling of broken promises.
Right. So with all that going on, what's the mood like? How's it showing up in, say, opinion polls?
The polls are pretty stark, actually. We saw an INSA poll mentioned quite a bit in the materials. It showed 62% of Germans are dissatisfied with his government. 62%.
Wow, that's high. That's a clear majority.
It really is. It's not just a little dip. It suggests a really deep unhappiness, maybe with the whole direction things are going, not just one or two policies.
Let's look at Merz himself for a second. The sources often describe him, wealthy background, career politician, time at BlackRock, part of the financial elite. How does that background seem to connect with the policies we're seeing, especially the economic ones?
Well, that's the crux of it, isn't it? His policies, according to the analyses we've read, they do seem to consistently favor wealthier groups, while at the same time there's this message of needing more work, harder work, from ordinary citizens. He calls it tough love, right? To boost discipline, competitiveness.
Tough love, okay. But how does that play out in practice, like with taxes?
That's where you really see it. Germany's tax system, our sources point out that about 80% of tax revenue comes from income tax and sales tax, VAT. So, the main burden falls on ordinary working families, on consumers.
Right, everyday people paying income tax, paying sales tax every time they buy something.
Exactly. Meanwhile, taxes on things like capital gains or inheritance, things that tend to affect the wealthy more, they're comparatively lower or have lots of loopholes and exemptions.
So the tough love mainly hits working people, while the wealthy benefit from the structure. Is that the argument?
That's precisely the criticism outlined in our sources. While Merz might frame it as making Germany stronger, critics see it as, well, a system that shifts wealth upwards. It makes it harder for regular folks to get ahead, while those with assets and investments tend to benefit more. Intentionally or not, it seems to widen the gap.
Okay, so we've got these policies causing friction and this perception of unfairness. Let's zoom out. What's the actual economic picture? Because these decisions aren't happening in a vacuum.
No, absolutely not. And the economic backdrop is, well, it's pretty grim, frankly. Germany's economy actually shrank last quarter by 0.3%, and that was worse than analysts expected.
Ouch. So not just slow growth, but actual contraction.
Exactly. And it's looking like it might not be just a blip. There's talk of a potential recession or at least, long-term stagnation. This isn't a healthy sign.
And it's more than just a number, right? There are job cuts.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. Industry is shedding jobs, hundreds of thousands, according to some reports. A kind of deindustrialization seems to be happening. The whole economy has been sluggish for years, really. And Germany's big reliance on exports, which used to be its strength.
Now makes it vulnerable.
Precisely. Especially with things like U.S. tariffs hitting trade. External pressures really matter when you're so export dependent.
And energy. That's going to be a huge factor, too.
Oh, definitely. Energy prices are still sky high. That decision to cut off Russian gas had massive economic consequences. It's hitting businesses hard, trying to stay competitive, and it's hitting households, just trying to pay the bills. It's a major drag on everything.
So slow growth, job losses, energy crisis.
Yeah.
We mentioned the debt earlier.
Right. On top of all that, Germany's racking up huge debts. The projections we saw, a potential budget shortfall of 170 billion by 2029.
170 billion.
Yeah. It paints a really challenging picture for the country's finances, both at home and, its standing internationally. Serious questions about sustainability.
Okay, so the domestic picture is tough. Economic trouble, public dissatisfaction. Yet, you mentioned Germany seems to be sticking closely to Washington's foreign policy line.
That's what our sources indicate, yes. Despite all these internal pressures, Merz's government seems very aligned with the U.S. approach internationally. And this is apparently happening even while some U.S. officials, maybe behind the scenes, are admitting they see allied economies partly as tools for American goals.
Yeah. Quite an admission to factor in.
It is. And some analyses we read draw a really interesting, maybe worrying historical parallel. They suggest Merz might be ignoring a key lesson from recent U.S. politics specifically. How Donald Trump came to power.
How so? What's the connection?
Well, Trump tapped into that feeling, didn't he? The feeling among many ordinary people that a corrupt establishment was ignoring them, neglecting their problems. The argument is when people feel left behind economically and see their government focused elsewhere, like on foreign commitments instead of domestic issues, it creates fertile ground for that kind of populist backlash.
So the risk is that by prioritizing international alignment and domestic austerity, Merz could inadvertently be creating the same conditions that led to Trump in the U.S.
That's exactly the warning that comes through in some of these sources. This combination, perceived establishment disconnect, economic pain, policies favoring the rich, money going abroad, it's a potent mix. If that feeling deepens in Germany, it could really pave the way for a similar kind of political upheaval.
So where does this leave Germany? Merz says he's rescuing the country, the tough love approach to restore discipline. But critics, as we've discussed from our sources, see it very differently. They say he's cutting the safety net, helping the rich, sending money abroad while Germans struggle. Starkly different views.
It really boils down to this provocative question raised in the material. Is he actually saving the establishment, or is he perhaps unintentionally destroying it? Because if things continue on this path, austerity, perceived neglect, prioritizing foreign policy over domestic needs, the implication is, well, eventually, Germans might just demand a government that puts their interests first, unequivocally.
Not America's interests, not Ukraine's interests, but German interests.
Exactly. It points towards a potential, maybe even a fundamental shift in German politics down the road, perhaps sooner than many think.
Well, we've certainly covered a lot of ground today in this deep dive. Pulled apart the threads of Merz's policies, the welfare cuts, the Ukraine aid, the struggling economy, the political strategies. It's complex.
It really is. But hopefully, understanding these dynamics, the contradictions, the pressures, the public mood, gives you a much clearer, more nuanced view of the challenges Germany is grappling with right now. And, the potential shifts on the horizon. It's a situation with major implications, not just for Germany, but for Europe and beyond.
Definitely. And maybe a final thought for you to chew on, building on everything we've discussed. In today's world, with all the economic stress and shifting global politics, how long can any government pursue policies that seem to put external commitments ahead of the immediate well-being of its own people? How long before those people demand a sharp change in direction? Something to think about, not just regarding Germany, but maybe closer to home too.